Now, coming to the inaugural keynote address by our friend Dr. Iltefat Hamzavi, a great motivator, a great sportive of Indian dermatology and sport to the Indian dermatologists. Just to introduce, Dr. Hamzavi received his medical degree from University of Michigan Medical School and graduated with academic honors in variety of specialty rotation. Dr. Hamzavi completed his residency in dermatology at Wayne State University and then spent time in Europe training at some of the world's leading skincare centers. In 2001, Dr. Hamzavi completed an advanced one-year laser and photomedicine fellowship at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Probably that's why we call him like the Vasi. He's known by the pet name Vasi. Dr. Hamzavi is an active clinical researcher and investigates causes and treatment of vitiligo, hidradenitis suppurativa, photomedicine, and other conditions. In addition to the time spent in his private practice, Dr. Hamzavi also served as senior staff physician at Henry Ford Health Systems Department of Dermatology and teaches medical students at Wayne State University. He has co-authored over 300 peer-reviewed papers which have been cited over 9,000 times in highly respected journals. He also volunteers his time with a variety of non-profits in education, civic engagement, bringing attention to various skin diseases like hidradenitis suppurativa. He has served as co-chair of Global Vitiligo Foundation and as president of Hidradenitis Suppurativa Foundation. Dr. Hamzavi, please.
Thank you, Devinder, and thank you for those of you who have spent the whole day with us and are going to spend part of the evening. This is a light-hearted lecture. It's not designed to be deeply scientific. It's going to just talk about our community. But it's a celebration of the people in this room. Now, it's not the celebration of Morocco making the quarterfinals for the first time. So, Leila, you're the one person from Morocco, but congratulations. And Ahmed Al Issa, Saudi Arabia beat Argentina. What's going on with that? Congratulations. USA, we were just happy to make it, but we're going to welcome you to our country in 4 years, and hopefully...
Busy with the science.
Yeah, so... Well, that's the community that we have. Devinder, who gently stepped off the stage, everybody knows him as this gentle giant of our field. But why are we here? What are we doing? Why are we taking time from our families? Why are we traveling to these different places? And that's the journey I wanted to talk about today. It's been a pretty incredible place to be. But when I say place, I don't mean a physical place. I mean a feeling, a sense that you're part of something that's a lot bigger than you. Our goal as this community, and it's stated by the Global Vitiligo Foundation, is to eliminate vitiligo through compassion, care, and cure. I'm going to talk a little bit about compassion today. I'm going to talk about the values of how we got here. But I want each one of you in this room to have a sense of wonderment that you've been part of the journey. You've been part of helping people with vitiligo cope with their lives. But by doing that, something inside of you feels a little bit better. So you have the motivation to care for humanity. There's a World Cup game going on. Leila is here. I don't know how Morocco's doing, but hopefully they're doing okay. But you're here. But it's not just being here. It's not just caring about why we worry and support our community of people with vitiligo. It's the fact that we're using science to do it. We have a massive program going on. You're learning about intracellular oxidative stress. You're learning about adaptive immunity. You're talking about phototherapy and surgery and outcome measures. But you're here because you don't want to see that child cry away. You want that young woman and man to get married. You want that individual to have the job. But you also know that just talking about it won't make it get any better. So this is a little video that we made in the United States, but it represents a global view because the US is a global country. And I wanted to share this with you from a couple years ago. Hopefully the sound will go up, so if you could raise the sound a little bit. Can we, let's see here. Can we try that again and see if we can get the sound? So when we were starting our goals in the United States, we wanted to actually tell people what it was like to have vitiligo. And in dermatology, it gets hard because life and death isn't always present. And maybe the sound's right here. Let's try this.
You look like a cow.
So let's start all over.
I'm burnt.
I'm a
Okay, so you can find this video on YouTube.
I'm Indian with white patches.
I'm an African American with white patches.
I am Hispanic with white patches.
I am black with white patches.
I'm Caucasian with white patches.
I am Asian with white patches.
I'm human with white patches.
They've heard it all.
It looks like your skin is coming off.
You look like a cow.
I'm burnt.
I'm ugly.
You're an alien.
The effects are devastating.
Why me? Why do I have it?
It made me feel bad, really sad.
So didn't know what the kids at school would say to me.
That made me feel ashamed of myself.
It was more just like a shock.
I was doing good. Am I that bad?
What they have is
Vitiligo.
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 We're twins and we have vitiligo. Vitiligo is a disease of the skin where patients lose their color. The result is white spots that appear that are pretty prominent and easy to recognize by everyone who sees them. The reason why the white spots appear is because the immune system, whose job it is to protect you from infection and cancer, crawls into the skin, finds the pigment-making cells, and kills them. The result is that in that area, there's no more pigment, and what's left is a white spot.
It does affect nearly 1% of the population, so about 1 in 100 individuals outside walking the street have vitiligo.
We believe around 70 million people in the world's population have vitiligo.
We have millions of patients worldwide that are affected, and some are behind closed doors. We need to open the doors, not just to the patients here, but around the world.
It does not have any barriers when it comes to race, ethnicity, or gender.
Vitiligo is not a black disease. It's simply more visible in darker racial ethnic groups.
I have no control over my emotions for it. And it's gonna do what it does. And it's a very sensitive subject.
There's a lot of self-esteem that he masks that's underlying that a lot of people can't see. But as his mom, I can see it. Maybe I won't do that one again.
That's all right. Vitiligo is not contagious.
So there's nothing wrong with touching our hands. There's nothing wrong with being around us. We are just normal people who's going through a skin condition that changes our pigmentation.
Vitiligo is a white patch that affects the soul.
There are various treatments for vitiligo. So these include topical creams that can affect the immune system. There are also light therapies.
There are success stories with the treatment of vitiligo, but they're stories. It's not a volume.
So we need better treatments that allow us to maintain it long term. And moreover, I want a cure.
And I believe with resources and funding and enough scientists and clinicians, we can find a cure.
There is so little funding for vitiligo that even a little bit makes a difference.
With patients' help, with the community's help, we can increase funding for vitiligo, which will drive treatments, which will drive innovation.
You can make a difference.
We can make a difference.
Together, we can make a difference.
This is my vitiligo, and this is my story.
This is my vitiligo. This is my story.
This is my vitiligo. This is my story.
This is my vitiligo. This is my story.
So, even now, it still gets you, doesn't it? Because whatever language and culture we all come from, you've all felt that. You've sat in the room and you've been witness to this pain that you can't stop. Even though you've worked so hard and you've trained so much. But that was the first part of the journey. We had to tell that story. And I remember Ahmed Al-Isa invited me to Saudi Arabia and actually asked me to speak about vitiligo. No one in the United States was calling me to speak about vitiligo, but he asked me. And he put on this incredible show, this beautiful place. And I felt this warmth and this compassion. He had built this special center called the National Vitiligo Center in Riyadh. And I remember thinking, wow, people across the world worry about this. Because in my own country, it wasn't a conversation. And a lot of us came together to have that conversation. And that video has had over 1 million hits. It also is an award-winning video. We had to raise the money to make that video. Now, the other part of this is if we don't talk to each other, nothing happens. And you're going to see a lot of pictures of people you might know, people you don't know. It is important to know the person, but really it's about all of you and all of us in this room. Because we are part of this movement. Both physicians, people with vitiligo, industry, families, government, and we have to keep telling a story. Every generation will have to keep telling a story. And Mauro Picardo was somebody who has these characteristics of forbearance. He is so patient. When you're in medicine and you're in dermatology, you're always thinking about, well, I'm better than that person because I have to feel better about myself. There's this incredible competition. All of us have had that sense. Mauro, I don't think he ever had that. Or maybe I just knew him before he had, white hair. But he has this patience, and this meeting that we have today, he set up. He felt that all of us need to talk. People from the United States, from Saudi Arabia, from Morocco, from India. Even Indians can talk to Pakistanis once in a while. I don't think we've had a Pakistani meeting yet, but once in a while it'll happen. People from Africa, people from Northern Africa, Southern Africa, but we all need to speak. And that's one quality I want to talk to you about. At this meeting, get to meet people like Mauro Picardo. Be patient with each other because each one of you has something to contribute. We may be talking about data, we may be talking about studies, but you've got a story about a patient, you've got an idea that we haven't thought about, so engage. And think about Mauro. And this is our meeting we had in 2018 in Detroit. This was all the people who showed up. I thought that Patrick Dawkins, who helped set up our AV systems, did the most incredible job. And then I saw this screen, and I'm like, wow, this is a much higher tech version. In the first parts of this meetings, when we used to have these meetings, starting in 2013, we would talk about how vitiligo treatments hadn't changed. In the 12th century Cairo or Benares, India, you had prayer, social support, herbs, sorolins, Puvasol. And up until maybe a few years ago, what more did we have? In the 21st century, even in Riyadh and Chandigarh and Bordeaux, you had these options. But that's still not enough, and we know it's not enough. But at least we have a better idea of how to use steroids orally for OMP, thank you to the Indian colleagues. We have a better idea of surgery thanks to the support of Saudi Arabia, bringing Indians like Sanjeev Molekar and Devinder Prasad and Samesh Gupta and all of you to talk about the impact of vitiligo surgery. We didn't know about that in the United States, but meetings like VIS brought us together. But we also cannot accept the lack of progress. Why don't we have better treatments? In 1977 in my country, and this might be more urban myth, but it's got some documentation in the congressional record, the Black Businessmen's Association got within one vote within our legislative body to provide funding for vitiligo. It failed by one vote, 1977. In my own country, where we have some of our racial disparities, Vitiligo is perceived to be a disease of black individuals. And due to the problems in my own country, we didn't make the advances. But all of us have those differences. We want to believe that these diseases are somebody else's problem. They're our problem. But you and we at the foundations have to be advocates for our patients, but we do that by creating a sense of community. Funding is still a challenge, but it's much better now. I never thought we would have a meeting in the Dodge Hotel. This is a nice hotel. We don't have any Dodge hotels in Detroit. I still love my city, but we got nothing like that. Interest from investigators. Now we have all these great posters and presentations, randomized controlled trials, and then the communication is getting better. But we have to remember that we have more work to do. The other element that's happening is that the physicians are taking the lead of the patients. We can't advocate for this disease state. The patients have to drive it. But we couldn't have patients in one silo and the physicians in another silo. They have to be together. And I wanted to thank a lot of the patients like Stephen from my hometown of Detroit. I always have to brag about my hometown. But also the members of BIPOC, the members from Africa who are here today, and thank you for being here. The young investigators, we look at that old video, and it was amazing how much black hair John Harris and I had at the time. Amit used to look the same. But the young investors like Deepthi Gia, Tasneem Muhammad, Nada Al-Bullock, our wonderful colleagues coming out of Egypt. We don't have you, we got nothing. But you also have to have a sense of sincerity. How many times have you sat and had dinner with one of your vitiligo colleagues? Like your own family. You can have a conversation and you can disagree about the data. I think apremilast is an incredible drug. I don't think so. I think vitiligo surgery solves all problems. I don't think so. I'm not sure if azathioprine is a good option. I think it does. But you know what you'll never hear in a meeting like this? Vitiligo is a cosmetic disease. You won't hear that. Why? Because we sincerely care, but we're using the scientific process to advance it. Transparency. We have changed ideas over the years. I remember when I first heard Dr. Capen's group and other groups talk about oral mini-pulse steroids, I was like, I'm never going to use oral steroids for vitiligo in the United States. But I think across the country now we're using it. So that candid, mission-centered relationship is so critical. My chairman, Dr. Henry Lim, who's also one of the co-founders of the Global Vitiligo Foundation, Alen Tayeb, were instrumental in respecting that. At this meeting, take time to listen to ideas you don't always agree with. And yes, we do want evidence that's randomized controlled that can be reproduced throughout the world. But let's not forget, we got to start somewhere. Sometimes it's just a case report. So having that respect. Alen Tayeb and Mauro Picardo were already great leaders in our specialty, but they would listen to all the posters and all the presentations, and Henry Lim would always encourage us to come forward. So the youth, or those of you from countries that don't have major research programs, you are welcome here. We want to hear from you. You're going to get research updates, but we're also going to talk about standardizing nomenclature. Sometimes it gets boring to talk about what is stable disease, what's unstable disease, what is repigmentation, what is depigmentation, how do we measure the emotional toil of vitiligo on the individual, how do we measure that in Korea, in India, United States, South America. Those become difficult conversations. They get taxing and tiring, but realize when you talk about it, you understand how important it is to improve the information that we do have. Years ago, 10, 12 years ago, we talked about creating this map. And we agreed that we would eventually create strict inclusion-exclusion criteria. And about, I think it was 10 years ago in Europe, many of us met and we came up with the non-segmental, segmental categorization of vitiligo. Well, that helped clinical trials narrow what they're going to do. Because as you've heard in these presentations today, vitiligo is a multifaceted disease. We were able to categorize non-responders. We are still working on standardizing the registries and the databases, but we do have molecular markers. John Harris and Julian Seneschal and other basic scientists gave us interferon as a potential primer of the process, CCXL9 and 10 as biomarkers. Amit Pandya did a lot of the blister studies to document that. And then we were able to develop these new trials where we have a first-in-time medication that the FDA has approved based upon this work. But it doesn't happen unless the patients are part of that process. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to tell you how important it was for the patients. Because if the patients didn't show up and knock on the doors of the governments and the funding agencies, nothing would happen. And we are so lucky to have people like Dr. Venkat Mysore, who's on the board of the ILDS, who's advocating to talk about the burden of vitiligo. There's groups such as Voice and Vitals. They are organizing the outcomes research. That is the language of clinical trials. If you don't know what a VES is, or a VASI, or a vitiligo noticeability scale, or the various other scores that are coming out, you cannot advocate. So take time to listen to the outcomes researchers. But do it within these values. We're a team. These are some of the values that we have at Voice, which is the outcomes group. We respect each other, but we also want quality work. We're not going to tolerate great work for skin cancer, psoriasis, and mediocre work for vitiligo. We'll also collaborate. We will lift each other up. If you don't have funding for an IRB, you don't have a fellow, talk to one of us. If you need help in getting funding from industry, industry's here, talk to them. If you need help running grants, if you just want to talk about the ideas of getting access to medications, we're here for you. But also, let's maintain the value of integrity. So many patients with vitiligo have a false promise. How many of you have gone on the internet and seen ads for vitamins, or for diet, or for surgery? But these are the values that we have to represent. Teamwork, quality, collaboration, integrity. There's nobody I know of who does that better than Devinder Prasad. Has anybody ever had a fight with Devinder Prasad? No. I don't think you have a temper. Because if you ever yelled at me, I'd probably start crying. But those values, Devinder, you represent just by your actions. You have been up since 6 o'clock this morning. You drove an hour in Bangalore traffic, which I heard is horrible. I was too scared to go through that traffic. And then, what is it, 7, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, and you're still here. So thank you for that. Samia Asmat broke her leg about 2 months ago. She needs assistance to get on stage, and she helped create the program today. Where does that come from? It doesn't come from honor or respect or status. She's already the chairperson of her department. She's one of the leading lights of dermatology in Egypt, but she's here today. We also have to take on bad theories. When we started in this journey, there was a theory of the convergence of neurogenesis theories or neurologic theories. Nobody agreed that this was an autoimmune disease. But John Harris and Julian Seneschal and others really pushed it forward to say, no, steroids work. We know that from the Indian experience. It's an autoimmune disease. We've proven that. But there was a massive collaborative project led by Dr. Richard Spritz that showed that most of the genes involved with vitiligo are autoimmune genes. That's where all this investment came from. And a lot of you participated by providing specimens for that particular study. For those global studies, consider doing that. Thierry Passeron, he's not here yet, but he did incredible work on showing that a drug doesn't work. Apremilast does not work for vitiligo according to randomized controlled trials. We had some really nice work by Imran Majid suggesting that that could be an option. But it's also our role to say it doesn't work and then tell everybody else based upon criteria. So we can care for patients, we can care for each other, but we also have to be honest about the process of science, and Thierry does a great job. We also have to have the courage to convene. Welcoming us to Bangalore with limited resources, and we're still not where we need to be, is a tremendous effort. But also, we'll go visit each other in the various departments. Whenever I go to Cairo, I feel like I'm home. Riyadh. If you come to Detroit, you're always welcome to hear Motown music, hear about Eminem, and see some of the best cars in the world. But also, our societies have supported us. IADVL, Skin of Color Society, the AAD. University of British Columbia helped develop the VASI score. They hosted us for a year and a half. The other thing about our movement is that we have full-time staff. We must build full-time foundations. And Patrick Dawkins and Kimberly Miller from T-Rex have been helping to run the GVF for the past couple of years, and I want to thank them and appreciate all their efforts. Patrick's way in the back, right there. Optimism. Please keep those values going. You have to hustle. You have to have a company that is out of India coming up with a phase 1 trial saying, we got a molecule and nobody believes in you. Well, believe in yourselves and somehow maybe this molecule will go forward. The vitiligo support group community, my gosh, how could we have gotten here without them? But I'm going to show you what they've done for our communities. VGICC, the Europeans have always convened us. They help standardize nomenclature. Info, the work that's going to go on this Sunday will be documenting some of the patient concerns. The basic science, John Harris, many of you know about his work and his work in helping to get ruxolitinib across the board. Julian Seneschal, same thing. Pharma, sometimes pharma gets a bad rap, some of it's deserved. But pharma organizes, it provides resources, and it doesn't tolerate bad science. And it also has to engage the patient voice. You become the funnel by which all this love and hard work becomes a product that is consistently applied throughout the world. So we thank you for being part of this community. So the intersection of society, science, and community, that's what we have. I promise you that if you stay with this journey, you will find the best friends you're ever going to have. When I landed in Mumbai, I went to go see one of my mentors, Dr. Molekar, and one of my former students, Vitiligo, picked me up. How does that happen? Because we all walk the same journey. Jungmin Bai, a brilliant Korean researcher, is doing some incredible work. He hates getting attention, so he's probably sitting here putting his hand on his forehead somewhere. Oh, there he is, and his hat is on the forehead, yes. So Jungmin Bai, thanks for all your excellent work that's coming up. Marwa Abdullah, thank you so much for your surgical work. Thank you so much for supporting Samesh Gupta and working with him. Nanya Van Giel, organizing all these conferences and consensus guidelines. Khalid Ezzeddin, Khalid and Nanya like brothers and sisters. It's like oil and water. But Khalid wants the best outcome measures, and those outcome measures are resulting in active trials that you're going to see in the next couple of years. Amit Pandya, there is no better educator, there's no better convener in our whole field than Amit Pandya, who's also our president of the GVF. But the best lecture I ever heard was by him, and he still gives some of the best lectures. And our patient members of our board, Stephen, Kim Boyd, and Richard Huggins, who as a physician decided to develop the field of patient voices, bringing the voice to the scientists. And Seemal Desai, our president of the American Academy of Dermatology. The largest body of dermatologists in the world now is headed by a person who's focused on vitiligo. And I wanted to thank Dr. Lim, but also Dr. Molekar, who was the leading light of Indian dermatology. This is how I found India. Even though it's not my heritage, I wasn't born here, but I came back because I met him and he really promoted vitiligo surgery. Now, this is the intersection I want to talk to you about. About a year or two ago, the FDA in the United States wanted to have a convening to talk about patient-focused drug development. This is where they want to hear from patients, and they want to know, what do patients want the FDA to do? And as many of you know, if the FDA makes a decision, the whole world kind of at least listens to it. And every year they document how many people showed up at their meetings. They've had meetings for psoriasis, for atopic dermatitis, for alopecia areata. Well, we gave it to our patient groups to organize a meeting. Patrick Dawkins provided support. Richard Huggins was a convening physician. And the largest number of patients who have ever attended an FDA meeting, over 1,000 people, showed up. More than psoriasis, not to compete in suffering, atopic dermatitis, for alopecia areata, it was vitiligo. So don't tell a patient who suffers from vitiligo it's a cosmetic disease, because they will show up at your door, and there's a lot of them. I want to thank you for taking the time to walk through this journey. It's not a scientific presentation, it's a sense of warmth. Welcome home. And that's the end of that presentation.